So the Pro Bowl is coming up soon, and due to the nature of the Pro Bowl and only a few players being voted in per position, of course players are going to be left out. However, there's a few guys that can go their entire career never being voted in, like Marcus Colston of the Saints, who had over 700 receptions, just under 10,000 receiving yards and 72 touchdowns in his career. Many great seasons, a Super Bowl champion, never went to the Pro Bowl. And now for many positions there are great players that just haven't been to a Pro Bowl, and in this video I'm going to highlight them. Now what I've tried to do is avoid rookies that didn't get in after a good rookie year and second year players that haven't got in after 2 decent years, but sometimes that's unavoidable. And of course I understand that not everyone can go to the Pro Bowl. There's only a certain number of places, and some positions just simply have more good players than there are places in the Pro Bowl. But that's not good enough. These poor players are being left out, and I'm going to highlight them in this video. Not that that does much for their self-esteem. For all but a few positions I've got a starter and a backup. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to name the backup first, then the starter, and I'm not going to go into detail about their careers, I'm just going to name them and move on. At left tackle we have Cordy Glenn and Nate Solder. Left guard starts with Jack Mewhort, and ahead of him Ramon Foster. At centre the incredibly versatile Matt Slauson, and ahead of him one of the few second year players I have selected, Mitch Morse. At right guard Kevin Zeitler, and then Gabe Jackson. At right tackle we start with Marcus Gilbert, and there were 1,001 incredibly good right tackles that have never been to a Pro Bowl. And our starter for that position is Mitchell Schwartz. Our first tight end is Charles Clay, and our starter is longtime veteran Benjamin Watson. Alright, we'll start next with the quarterbacks, and I wanted to mention Joe Flacco because I thought it was quite incredible that a man who won a Super Bowl MVP award has never been to a Pro Bowl. Kirk Cousins too has never been to a Pro Bowl, but then again he has just had a couple of starting seasons so far. Marcus Mariota is another second year player, so again kind of cheating, and even more so I'm basically just basing this on the fact that I thought he should have gone to the Pro Bowl this year. Next up we'll move on to the running backs, starting with Darren McFadden, who's had a couple of seasons where you figure he could have easily made it to a Pro Bowl. LeGarrette Blount, who I kind of understand why he hasn't made it to a Pro Bowl yet, but you score the most rushing touchdowns out of any running back in the NFL and you still don't get in. And our starter is going to be Lamar Miller. Our fullback Anthony Sherman, there's a couple of decent fullbacks that have never been to a Pro Bowl. And then we move on to the wide receivers, and this group is ridiculous. Because of how stacked this group is, I'm going to do them in order of their Madden Ultimate Team overalls, and of course in reverse order, so we end up with the starters at the top. Our first receiver, Keenan Allen. Now remember, this guy is supposed to be the worst of all the receivers that haven't been to a Pro Bowl. Second receiver, Michael Crabtree. And our third and final receiver of the first group, Eric Decker. These are not the best receivers that haven't been to a Pro Bowl. Sammy Watkins, Brandon Cooks, and Julian Edelman. None of these guys, of course, because they're in this team, have ever been to a Pro Bowl, and I find that kind of crazy. Now, of course, this is down to the fact that there's a whole bunch of good receivers in the NFL, far more than there are Pro Bowl positions, but you figure they'd get in sometime. And that finishes the offense. In terms of Madden Ultimate Team overalls, this is the highest rated offense I've ever put together with a 91 rating. So onto the defense, and we'll start at the top with the free safeties. Our first player is Darian Stewart, arguably the most underrated player and like third best defensive back on the Denver Broncos defense. And our starting free safety will be Mike Mitchell. He's been around a while, never been to a Pro Bowl. Now onto the strong safeties. We start with Calvin Pryor, and next up we have Patrick Chung, another guy who's won a Super Bowl but not been to a Pro Bowl. Now we move on to the middle linebackers, and this is another position group where there's so many players, so we'll start with our right outside linebackers. We start with Zach Brown, who is an inside linebacker, but Madden couldn't care if you tried to tell them. He did have some good seasons with the Titans, but this is one of those again where really it's just an argument of why didn't he make this Pro Bowl? 149 tackles, 4 sacks, 4 passes defensed, an interception and 2 forced fumbles. Doesn't make the Pro Bowl. Ahead of him we have an actual outside linebacker, DeAndre Levy, and I don't know how he hasn't ever made a Pro Bowl in his career. Alright, onto the left side. We start with Mark Barron. Since he moved to outside linebacker for the Rams, he hasn't had less than 100 tackles. And again, this is one of those guys who's only played in that position for 2 years, so is right on the line of being eligible. Then we have Rob Ninkovich. I know every single Patriots fan in the world agrees with me. Then we have Whitney Merciless, who again is kind of one of those guys where I'd only argue over the last 2 years he should have made it, but he's still been very good all the rest of the years of his career. Last year, you could argue, oh, you know, it's the JJ Watt effect, This year, there is no JJ Watt and he still gets 7.5 sacks. No more excuses, Merciless deserves to go to a Pro Bowl. Then we move on to the middle linebacker group, which is incredibly deep, and I get this. See, only 2 middle linebackers go to a Pro Bowl, a starter and a reserve, despite the fact that probably half the teams in the NFL have 2 starting inside linebackers. That's the reason why there's so many good middle linebackers that haven't been, but it's still no excuse. We start with Preston Brown, and that makes 2 Buffalo Bills inside linebackers called Brown. Next up is Zachary Orr, and this one is cheating. He's been in the league for 3 years, but has only really started playing this season. But how he didn't make it in this season is beyond me. 132 tackles, 91 solo tackles, 5 passes defense, 3 interceptions, and a forced fumble. I mean, how much more could he have done? And then we have Alec Ogletree, our second to last middle linebacker, Jarrell Freeman. I mean, he's had 1,000 tackles every year he's been in the NFL, and that's almost not an overstatement, except for it is by 900. But still, how he hasn't been to a Pro Bowl yet is beyond me. And then finally, Ryan Shazier. Now I get this one, he's not played a full season yet, he's only been around for 3 years, has missed a lot of games, but again, this season, 87 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 3 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles, and no discredit to Dante Hightower or CJ Mosley, both of whom I'm biased towards, but you've got to feel like some of these guys were potentially more deserving. And if not, then we've just got to add more middle linebackers to the Pro Bowl, because these guys potentially going their careers long without ever making it is just an injustice. And that completes the linebackers, so we move on to the defensive line. So we start with the right end position. We start with Corey Liuget. If you don't think this is one of the best 3-4 defensive linemen in the country, then you don't watch the Chargers often enough. How Jerry Hughes never made it to a Pro Bowl the 2 years before this one, I also can't quite rationalize in my own head. And then finally, Mike Daniels. I mean, Jarrell Casey finally made it to the Pro Bowl last year and went again this year, and now we're just waiting for Mike Daniels, basically the same kind of player in the same position, to make it as well. So on to the defensive tackle position. We start with Danny Shelton. It's hard to shine on the Browns defense. And then we have Damon Harrison. What more did Damon Harrison have to do this year to prove that he should have been to the Pro Bowl the last 3 years? Then onto the left end position, and I've got Danielle Hunter. This is kind of a cheat again, he's not been around long enough. Malik Jackson, another player lost in the scheme, and then Cameron Hayward on top of that. And then finally onto the cornerbacks. We start with Jason McCourty. Alteron Werner went to a Pro Bowl, it should have always been Jason McCourty. Then David Amerson, another guy who's only done it for 2 seasons, but still he's definitely Pro Bowl level. Then we have Ronald Darby, another guy, just 2 years. Yes, he did take a slight step down this year, but he fits the description, a very, very good player that hasn't been to a Pro Bowl. Then we have Bradley Roby. This is just like Darian Stewart. I think the thinking is you can't send the entire Broncos defensive backfield to the Pro Bowl, but then again they sent TJ Ward. How they don't send Darian Stewart or Bradley Roby is beyond me. I think I've said that a couple of times this episode. And then finally, Darius Slay. They don't call him Big Play Slay because he doesn't deserve to be in the Pro Bowl. They call him that because he's definitively one of the single best cornerbacks in the NFL. At punter, we have Marquette King. Kind of surprised he hasn't been, but then again, he is in the same conference as Pat McAfee, and then you kind of understand it. And now the kicker. I made this team before Sunday, but Mason Crosby has never been to a Pro Bowl. Obviously, kickers and punters, there's only one that goes to the Pro Bowl from each conference every year, and now I've left kick and punt returners off. I've left long snappers off, although there's plenty you'll find that haven't been to a Pro Bowl, but this is the team. This is pretty much the best team I've ever put together in any of these videos, and like I said at the start, I completely understand why these players may not have been to the Pro Bowl. I just wanted to highlight and create a team of players that haven't been to the Pro Bowl and show you how good it is at every single position. It's not like there's one position that, okay, I understand. They're all very, very good. And there we have it. Building yourself a team of a bunch of losers that can't even make it to the Pro Bowl will cost you 3.5 million coins on Xbox One and will leave you with your 91 overall team with a 91 rated offense and a 91 rated defense. And let's just for one last second again look at all these receivers that have never been to a Pro Bowl. Marcus Colston, you're in good company.